Welcome to the Clear Voice podcast, brought to you by Clear Career Professionals. Today, we'll be talking about Clear's expansion with our Northwest Regional Director. First, I'd like to say hello to Clear's President, Michael Boese, who's joining us.
Good morning, James. I'm really excited to be here this morning, and what a beautiful fall day in Texas. The guest we have on, Mark Shrives, I'm just honored that we were able to bring him on to the Clear team. Such an amazing career in several different fields. I think having this discussion and what led us to Montana and opening our Northwest regional office is going to be really great for our listeners, and also provide some depth into Mark's experience and how we can really impact local governments, throughout that region.
Yeah, definitely. It might be a nice fall day here in Texas, but I imagine it's even prettier up where Mark is, isn't he, in Montana?
Yeah, I believe so. Mark, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and I know we'll dive more into your career depth here in a minute, but, everybody's excited to hear what it's like to be up in Montana.
All right, great. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, James. Actually, it's supposed to be 80 degrees here today, but really glad to have an opportunity to talk today and talk a little bit about expanding Clear into the Northwest. Kind of interesting. I started my career in the military. I graduated from college, went into the military as a commissioned officer. And as you go in the military, you need to set a goal for yourself. My goal was I wanted to be a lieutenant colonel, a battalion commander, and I managed to do that. And I got to that point, and I decided it was probably time with my kids. My oldest was getting ready to start high school, so I opted to retire. And we actually moved back to Montana, to Hamilton, Montana, and that's where I retired. And then I was unsure what I was going to do. I saw that Hamilton was hiring a city administrator, so I looked at that opportunity and I thought, I think my military skills might translate nice to this job. And so that's how I got into city management. So I started my city management career in Hamilton, Montana, as their city administrator.
I love your military story, and certainly we want to talk more about your transition from the military into city management. We have a few folks that have went through our recruitment processes that have done something similar, and we're always eager to get that leadership into cities, because the military folks generally have a good position of leading people and really what it takes to transform an organizational culture. So excited to learn more about your journey in that. Mark, I was so honored to be able to work with you in the Columbia Falls city manager recruitment. And I don't know if you could talk a little bit about how you found Clear and kind of what intersected yourself to what we do.
Well, interestingly enough, I did not plan to be working in Columbia Falls. I got a phone call from the retired city manager who I had known for several years. She told me kind of what was going on in Columbia Falls and asked if I'd be interested to come in to be the interim city manager. I met with the city council, had a real good feeling about the city council, and so told them I'd go ahead and take that position for about 6 months, with part of it being that we needed to hire a new city manager. I actually put out a request for proposals for a recruiting firm. I think the city received about 16 responses, and we went through those, and Clear rose to the top. One of the things that I saw when I was going through the proposals is just the process that Clear uses, and particularly the one-on-one semifinal interviews I thought was very useful. So that's how we selected Clear and moved forward, and it was a great process. And actually, talking about military, we did hire a retired naval officer who's now at the city, and he and I speak quite often, and he's loving it. And I think the city's really happy with him and what Clear was able to do to find him to come to Columbia Falls.
Yeah, it was a great process to be able to go up and work in Montana. On our semifinalist interview process, one of the things that we do really differently is we don't do like a one-way interview with the semifinalists or something that's impersonal. We gather our team together and have a virtual interview with those semifinalist candidates. I was able to have Mark be one of the folks as the interim city manager on that group that was interviewing the semifinalists. And I think I really connected with your leadership style a lot, Mark. I think all of us, since we formed the company as being retired city folks and people who just really have a passion for helping people and helping communities, leadership always is at the forefront of what we're trying to evaluate and assist cities in identifying. And so I caught on quickly as the process went through in Columbia Falls, your depth of leadership skill sets, your emotional regulation, kind of tuning back into the podcast that we had last week with Marcel Burnell and all that he's doing on that. And we were able to bring you onto our team I think it just really adds so much more to what we can do. And when I was up in Montana, we also had the opportunity to work in Great Falls with their deputy city manager recruitment. And what I've seen is there's some amazing people up in Montana, up in the Northwest. When we led the CEO recruitment for CPSHR, and I was able to work out in California and kind of see those candidates, I think there's a real need for what we do, in the sense that the candidate focus is really, really important for professionals. Also being able to get in and provide these services that have depth and knowledge, but from a company that really values what the overall positive impact is. Mark, if you could kind of walk us through a little bit what your thought process was as coming on to Clear, and then what are some of the things that excite you about opening that Northwest office where we can really focus in on that region?
Yeah, that's a good question. After you and I met, and then after I left Columbia Falls and we talked about joining Clear, that wasn't something I had originally thought about. I've been in city management for over 20 years, and it's just something that I really look forward to being able to keep doing. And I thought doing the Northwest office was a really good idea, and the fact that I was a city manager in Oregon and then in Montana twice, and so I've stayed connected with a lot of the people I know in Oregon and obviously Montana. I do still know some people in Washington also. So I just thought it might be a great chance to expand Clear into the Northwest and to try to bring that process that is used by Clear into the Northwest, and maybe again really try to help some communities find some great city managers. When I started city management, I just really think when you come out of the military with your leadership and management that you've gone through, you do all the things. You do budgeting, you do infrastructure, so you're bringing those skills. And you don't have to be a retiring lieutenant colonel or colonel. I mean, captains, majors who are just getting out of the military, even non-commissioned officers. Maybe you won't step right into a city manager position immediately, but there's certainly so many other options that are available through cities that you can get involved in and work your way up. So I just really found military skills to be just a nice fit to move into city management. I've thought that ever since I got into city management, and I've always wanted to push the military side also.
When we look at our military candidates, I'm always impressed by their journey and, what they've learned at the different schools that the military invests in them. I think we have a program slated for the near future where we're going to have yourself and a few other retired military folks who've moved into city management come on and really talk about how they translate the skill sets they learn while they're serving their country into being a city manager. And if there's some advice I could give those military folks, is making sure that the language correlates to what cities are currently doing. And that's something that when we did the Columbia Falls recruitment, the city manager that the city hired, Eric, did really well in his interviews. I thought he correlated what was happening in the military, and maybe there's different language for it in the military, but he really simplified it and was able to explain specifically how it related to what the city would be doing and how he would lead those efforts. Can you speak a little bit about that? And then maybe your thoughts on what candidates can do to make that transition in the interview process?
Yeah, you're right. Eric did a great job. I mean, he not only just being able to translate his military experience into, we'll call it municipal government experience, but he did his research. I mean, my gosh, he was asking questions and had information about the city that was really impressive. I think that was so helpful for him. There's really a lot of help when people are retiring or just getting out of the military, where there is help with resumes and looking at trying to convert your military acronyms into not much different though. Now you're talking municipal acronyms, but it's the same. That is just something that you have to really sit down and think about. I do remember a question that I was asked in an interview one time from one of this was actually when I was interviewing to go to Oregon. One of the city councilors said, "Oh, I don't know, you're military, you're going to be a dictator." So you have to take away that kind of that military look, if you will, and translate it into what people are thinking in the civilian world. I explained to him that I'm not a dictator. That's not how I run things. It doesn't matter if you're in the military or in the civilian career. It's just how you manage and lead people, and that's the important part. So actually, he and I became good friends after I got that job. you've got to be prepared to answer those questions, because that's a lot of people's mindset when people are coming out of the military. And then from the flip side, as the person coming out of the military, remember that, because it is different in the military than it is in the city management.
Yeah, that leadership skill set of dictatorship or kind of the perceptions of other folks. What I always tell leaders is having a variety of skill sets that you utilize in depending on the circumstances that you're leading through. And certainly there may be a time where you do need to be a dictator. I know James and myself, coming from the public safety side of things, on a critical incident, when you ask somebody to do something, it needs to be done without question and moving forward to where you can accomplish significant things for communities and safety. And I know that's a very similar thing in the military, but then expanding that skill set out to where you also have a ton of soft skills and other ways to lead. But as we kind of talk more about that, I think one thing I love having you on our team for is when we get a resume from a military person, sometimes it's so confusing for me to read, not having served in that role. They'll list ranks and or job titles, and they really don't do a good job of explaining what that means. And so could you maybe lay out some advice on what folks could do even on their resume to help it make it more clear to cities and people who haven't been in the military what exactly, those acronyms and different titles mean?
Yeah, that's always the interesting part, because you've been in the military. If you're retiring, that's all you've done. You've really got to think through how you're explaining things. So you got to really talk about the things you've done, infrastructure, budgeting, all the things that tie in with city management. That's what you need to focus on. Titles don't mean a lot. They do mean a lot, but they don't mean a lot when you're trying to transfer those to a resume. And so that's what's important, to try to just think through. And again, I will say, I know all the military, Army, Air Force, Navy, they do have transition programs now that really do try to help translate that. But on the flip side is, you may not know that you want to get into city management, just like I didn't know until I read the job description and said, well, I think my skills translate to that. So I'm going to apply for this position. But again, I had to think at the time and write my resume for the city management position that was going to be understood versus bringing in my military speak, if you will.
Mark, I kind of want to transition the conversation a little bit to what our plans are as far as the services we offer. And I would just let folks know who are listening to this podcast, we're not your typical recruiting firm. The way we do things, the way we focus in on the candidate, the way we really try to build personal relationships, not only with the candidates, but the city, I think is dramatically different than what most recruiting firms are doing. I think we're innovative with our approach, hence the Position podcast that James does with our recruitments, and really being able to have a platform where listeners can hear who they're going to be working with, who's going to be their leader, and see what the alignment is between what the organizational goals are and also what their personal goals are before they even apply. And what I've noticed on the Position podcast is it really assists the candidates in doing their best interview, because they already know some of the challenges and some of the things that are facing the position. So when they're in front of a panel, they're really able to synchronize their depth with overcoming the challenges that the position may face if selected. But really about 50% of what we do is on the consulting side of things. And I know that you and I have been working on a proposal for a strategic plan out in California. There's a number of different things that we can look at. And I want to talk a little bit about your ability to get in and help cities in other ways different than just recruiting.
Well, strategic plan, you do that in the military. I mean, that's what you're doing all the time. And it just translates again. There's another skill that you can bring to the municipal side. As a city manager, I either led several strategic planning sessions for communities, the communities I worked with or worked in. Also brought in some consultants to do some strategic plans, because you need to really be thinking about where you want to take the city into the future, be it 3, 5 to 10 years down the road. Obviously, those things are going to change, but you've got to have a plan. So that's something I've done a lot of, is strategic planning. I think the other thing that I can help bring to a city, and I know that we've been talking about that and working on that. And when I got done with city management, I went to work with FEMA. We've been talking about putting together some emergency management training. It's great to have a plan, but if it sits on the shelf and draws dust, then it's not going to do you much good. So you need to practice that plan. And also, I know there's a lot of changes going on potentially with FEMA, and some of the work I did with FEMA, I can translate right over into helping cities identify the things they may need to do that used to be a FEMA provided item that may not be FEMA anymore. Both strategic planning, emergency management planning, and probably other items that the city might want to get involved with. I think between myself and the rest of the CLEAR team, I think there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Mark, we really appreciate you bringing your skills to CLEAR. And that's one of the things that we've talked about on this podcast before is with the team that we have available, basically anything that a city has a problem with, if they just reach out, we probably have somebody that can help them. And sometimes we may not advertise something like the emergency management aspect, but if you have a problem, we've got Mark now. So reach out and we'll find something for you. And with the expansion north and west, I know CLEAR is going to be at ICMA, I believe. So can you kind of tell us a little bit about that, Mike, and what folks that's coming to ICMA can expect from us?
Yeah, we sort of identified the ability to get out and really make this impact across the country. Our first few years, we really wanted to focus in on Texas, which is where we started the company and where we really wanted to have our first impact. But as we continued to grow, and now we have a staff of over 20 retired and or active municipal folks who are part of our team, we really wanted to expand our ability to impact communities across the nation. And so when Mark came on, we also added Jeff Spivey down in the Florida region. Even though Jeff did most of his work in Texas, he lives in the Southeast now. And so we wanted to be able to go to ICMA, and this will be our first year at the conference, having a booth and really marketing to those people attending that conference, all of our services. And we're excited about that. We want to be able to get into these communities and have an impact. And something that is very close to our heart is the tragedy that happened down in Kerrville. We happened to work with Dalton Rice and through that selection process when he became city manager down there. And we've been in touch with Dalton throughout this tragedy and seeing how he's doing, just checking on him and making sure he's doing okay. But when we added Mark, really what I started looking at is we have the ability to get in and kind of do these emergency preparedness assessments. And something that struck me is when I became city manager in Wimberley, they had previously lost life in a major flood in 2015. And when I got there, unfortunately, their emergency management plans weren't up to par with where they should be, having experienced such a tragedy. And so I really focused in on the first year on revamping those emergency plans, really coordinating with the county and first responders, trying to make sure we had a good outline for what that looked like when an emergency occurs. Mark and I had talked about this, being able to get into these communities and really just do a quick assessment of what their disaster response looks like. How capable are they of responding to something that happens tragically in their community? And it's not something where we have to go all the way down to looking at infrastructure where we need to have an engineer come in. We're certainly capable of doing that. But oftentimes as city manager, I think it's really important for us just to be able to get a 360 view of where we're currently sitting and have somebody come in and go, hey, here's where you really need to focus your attention in the immediate, in the midterm, and then here's what your long-term planning needs to be. And now having somebody on our team that has that FEMA experience and also the military and strategic planning experience, that's where I think Mark can be really impactful across the country, making sure that communities are as safe as possible because we want to avoid tragedy. And when you look at tragedy, it's so much about mitigation on the front end and not focusing so much on what the response looks like once an emergency occurs. But Mark, can you talk a little bit more about that? And naturally, I know that's one of your passions.
You're right. Mitigation is so important because you've got to be thinking about what you need to be prepared for. The recovery, yeah, that's going to happen. It's painful. There's a short term and then a long term recovery, but it's so important to really look at what your plans are and then to exercise your plans because you need to do some testing to say, is this plan the correct one or do we need to make some changes? Is this going to help us down the road? So I don't think it takes a huge effort to go in and do that. And I guess I bring a little more other experiences. Most states have municipal insurance pools. For several years, been on the board of directors for the insurance pools, and that was one of the things. Obviously, you always talk about is risk, and so I've been pretty involved in looking at risk across communities to try to identify what's the important part that we need to focus on to prevent tragedies. I mean, it's going to happen, but if you've got a plan, at least you can be ready to try to, going back to your word, to mitigate that and come out with a better outcome at the end.
Recently, I was able to present at the Texas Public Owners Forum on designing for safety and security. And I know that's not necessarily what we're talking about when we're talking about an emergency management assessment, but I think the more planning you put into that, bringing professionals in to really look at it, ultimately, what you're trying to do is minimize the loss of life, which is the most precious thing that we experience in government, is making sure that we preserve as much life as possible when there is one of these events. You can also look at your recovery and make sure that that's going to be fast in response, but also impactful in the sense that when a tragedy happens, it's people who are impacted. I always talk about this throughout what we do, but people far too often focus only on process. And really what we do in municipal government is about the people. And so I'm really excited to be able to bring these assessments in addition to what our org reviews are, and kind of being able to bring those org reviews to the Northwest as well. We recently had the opportunity to do a police department org review for a city south of San Antonio. And unfortunately, the department we were looking at was not performing to a level that they should be. And being able to get in and make those recommendations to the city manager and the city council to where they can transition and really move the department forward, that's really fulfilling for us. And I know that you're capable of doing some of those things up in the Northwest and in California. What do you think is your passion as far as being able to get in and really make that organizational culture more vibrant and able to serve the public?
As we've talked, to be able to go and meet with the city manager and the city council, first of all, and you've got to identify what are their priorities, what are they looking for? Because even in FEMA, when we would go in and meet with cities and the state, the question always was, what are the long-term, short-term, and long-term priorities? And so same thing working with the municipalities. You've got to identify the priorities, and then, okay, what can we bring to help you look at these and bring this in and do that? And I don't know how much of that's really been going on in the Northwest. I'm sure some, but I think that's what I really would like to do, is to get involved and come into communities and see what we can identify to help them make the changes that, again, are going to, serve the citizens of the community and move them forward. If you're a city manager, you always your goal is to try to make things better for the community, however that may be. And so bringing in a firm to take me look at some of these items, I think that's something that I would really like to have an opportunity to do. And I'm looking forward to the ICMA conference, because I want to try to reach out and talk to my Oregon and Washington and California and Montana counterparts to say, how can we help you? And so looking forward to going to the conference. And I know I'll probably see a lot of people I have known through the years.
Yeah, and we're going to have a strong team at the conference. Mark, I know you're going to be there. We're bringing Kent Myers, who has a long history in city management, but is currently serving as the first city manager of Starbase. That's been a project where we've been really excited to work with SpaceX on. That's such a wonderful thing that we get to do. As we're moving more and more through this, what I really want people to understand is exactly what you just said. How can we help? And I think that's the thing, having sat in that city management role, and we don't just have, people who've been former city managers. We have people who have led organizations from the chief level or department director level. And having sat in those different roles and being able to understand first failure, like I know in my career, there's been times where I've made bad decisions, where I have made mistakes, and I've learned from those things. So being able to collectively bring a team together to go, hey, how can we analyze what's going on here? And then how can we move the organization forward is something that's really enjoyable for our team. And that circles back around to recruiting, in the sense that if we can recruit and we can really present the candidates to the community in whatever role it is that can really transform their organization and impact their community, that's one of the most important parts of any type of organizational review. I think it's John Maxwell who recently said the thing that separates equally comparable teams is leadership. And so when we look across municipal government and all the things that are going on, there's some really great people that are actually doing the work. When you look at your public works folks out there and they're fixing the streets or they're making sure that the water and sewer works properly, or you're looking at your firefighters or your police officers, the people who are doing the work are typically doing amazing. And where we lose the ability to really impact our communities is often that first line supervisor through the top of an organization, because they forget what leadership's about. It's about inspiring and motivating people. And I recently had a deal where a city manager asked me, there's those people who say we just have to get the job done. I'll talk about team later. I'll go do my work, and then I'm going to go home and I'm going to take care of the people that I truly care about. And what I tell folks like that maybe see that perspective is there's absolutely a place for that type of leadership. It's called an assembly line, where you can just get on, do the work that you're supposed to do, and then not worry about the people. But if you're working in government, the people are the most important thing. And so can you talk a little bit about your experience with that and maybe or the perspective that you can offer when these organizations hire us up in the Northwest to get in and really transform their organizational culture?
That's assembly line is a great analogy, I think. When you think about being a city manager or even a department director, truly, you're number one, you're not doing it for the money, but you've got to have the passion that you're there because you want to make a difference. Making that difference means you've got to be listening to people, and sometimes it's not pleasant to take all the complaints and be the person that's taking that, but that's what you're there for. So you've got to have some thick skin and be able to look out and say, okay, I got this. Let me go look at this item or what this may be. From my perspective, it's always been, how can we help the citizens and what can we do? And that's kind of the idea you've got to come in with. And not only as the city manager, but as the department directors, because just getting the job done, great. You fix that water leak, but you did fix that water leak, and how many people did that impact? You are making a difference when you're doing a lot of this work in the cities, and you just really need to try to sit back and say, we did make a difference today. And same with the police department or the fire department. It's a job, but at the end of the day, you have made an impact. So that's the way I've always looked at it. And I've tried to impart that in anybody that has worked for me, is that we're here doing more than just showing up 8 to 5.
Mark, I want to say, as we're wrapping up here, first of all, thank you for being on today. And I always have great appreciation for anybody that served our military, especially a long career like yours. It's even more amazing when I see military veterans coming out that have served their country and then decide that they want to continue that life of service in a municipality. That leadership and those skills are much needed all across all departments in municipal and other levels of government. It's very impressive that you did what you did for a career, but then to come out and continue that service. I just want to say thank you so much for that.
Thanks, James. I appreciate that.
Michael, anything that you want to add before we wrap up here?
I want to say that we've opened our Montana office and Mark is there and able to serve the Northwest currently. But, when you hire Clear up in Montana or Oregon or Washington or California, you're gaining our whole Clear team. And I think that's the really cool thing is anytime somebody hires us, we're not just a one person who's going to be working on a project. Well, you'll have a direct connection like Mark that's making sure everything is done properly and making sure we have an understanding of what's going on at all levels of the organization. You gain our entire Clear team. I want to make sure people check our website. Mark's contact information is on there. And we're really excited about our ability to get in and impact communities. Recently, I've talked with Joe Turner, who Mark and I both know, and he's doing a tour with AAME in the Southeast. And we're happy to sponsor Joe as he's, going out and advocating for city managers in that region. And we're hoping we get more work down in the Southeast and able to have an impact there. But the Clear Way is something that we talk about a lot, and that's being value focused, not only in making sure that what we're charging is affordable for cities to hire us, but also that we're holding true to our core values, which often is doing something greater than ourselves and making sure that these communities rise above just the basic levels of service, or making sure that the place where people get in and work is a really good culture and inspiring those folks to do more and more for the communities they serve.
Thank you, Michael. Mark, I'm going to let you have the last word since you're our esteemed guest. Before I do, I just want to say that if you ever need any help in the Montana office during the summertime or maybe fall, call and let me know. But once the snow starts falling, I'll just help you remotely.
I don't know. The snow's a good time of the year. Mike mentioned something that I didn't talk about earlier, and I do think it's important. When I was the interim city manager in Columbia Falls. And that's the price of the service. If you're proposing to a small community that's on a tight budget, you've got to keep that in mind. So that was another thing that really highlighted to me the service that I was going to get as the interim city manager, and the price that the city was going to pay was unbelievable. And I really did appreciate that. And I know the mayor and the city council appreciated it. So that is also a very important thing that you need to think about. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk today, and also appreciate the opportunity to be part of Clear. It wasn't something I was looking to do, but it turned out to be a great thing, and I appreciate it. And looking forward to getting the Northwest office up and running, and do some work in Montana, Oregon, Washington, and California. I guess I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mark and Michael, for being on today, and we will catch you next time.